Hello and welcome to Conversations with Catholics. I am joined again today by Mark. For those of you who remember, Mark and I just had a conversation 3 weeks ago, um, and we've continued the conversation over email since then. But now we're getting back on the phone together to kind of see if we can't drill down and I think get to the bottom of things, as it were. So, Mark, what's up? So happy to have you back.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me again.
Um,
Um,
Go ahead.
so yeah, last time was it gave me a lot to reflect on. Um, I actually took a lot of the things that we talked about pretty seriously as far as epistemology goes of how I come to know things. And the reason we talked about this over email, why I wanted to talk again, was because it seemed like we were having some disconnect on some concrete foundational beliefs that we weren't really able to hash out, probably partially because of from my fault from not even really knowing what to ask you. I started asking about, do you think morality is subjective or objective? And you answered, I don't think morality exists or something like that,
Yeah.
which I was just confused. And so I had to really go back and understand what it is that you think about reality. And that's kind of what um, we're going to do today.
I like it. And Daniel chimes in. So you said that I confused you a little bit. Kevin will do that to you. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm not the clearest communicator at times. It's something that I know and I'm working on. But hey, that's I'm so grateful that you are giving me a second shot. Hopefully, we can make some progress today. So
Yeah. Um, so we had three questions for each other. Would you like to start, or would you like me to re-ask you the ones that I gave you?
um yeah. So you know what? I know right before we went live, I said that I would ask you the first question, but now that I
Sure.
come to think about it, I think that your questions kind of just make more sense to go first.
To
Do you
go
do
first.
you think
Yeah.
so?
Yeah, because a lot of it's basic, just definitions and stuff.
Yeah,
So we can,
yeah.
and
Okay,
even in that, we're probably going to have some conversation about those
I
definitions.
think so. Yeah.
So yeah,
So
that is a good place to start.
cool.
I will ask you verbatim what I typed to you. All right. Okay, so I said, in your worldview, explain the difference between something being real versus not real. Again, another difference between something being subjective versus objective. And finally, the difference between something being true versus false.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna look at my response, and I'm gonna hope because I so what just for the audience, what Mark and I did is we wound up sending each other these questions ahead of time. We gave each other like a quick kind of like 2 sentence response on each one, but we're gonna hash out the details here. So the way that I think about truth and existing are quite similar. Um, I think that. Or I should say realness and existence I find quite similar. So if something is real, I kind of just mean it exists. And when I say that something exists, what I just mean is, and this is going to sound like tautological, but if something exists, it like comports with the reality that that thing has realness. So again, it's kind of it's almost circular in that sense. Um,
That's fine. So let's stop there and then let's go to the subjective versus objective. So now I would ask you, do you think um, reality is subjective or objective?
yeah, and I'm an emphatic objectivist about reality. I think
Yeah.
that reality exists and humans perceive it. Some of us poorly, but reality is
Yeah.
objective.
Okay. So we think like I see your guitar, in your background. So we have like we're imagining you looking at your guitar and you are the subject. You you see this guitar in material matter You can feel it, touch it, see it, play it. Now, let's pretend you're just out of the room and there's some spectator, but it's not you. Now, we can all imagine this, but we actually can't empirically or scientifically ever. It's hard to even philosophically presume this, because who is it that's seeing this imaginary room that is through no one's eyes? But the reason why I asked such a this weird question, it's kind of like the tree falls in the woods question that we've all heard when we were like in elementary school. It goes into the nature about reality outside of the subject viewing it. And so you and I both agree that your guitar is the same. It doesn't change whether you're looking at it or no one's looking at it.
Correct. I would say that even if the tree doesn't make a sound, it still does fall. Or even if nobody hears the sound, it still does. Whatever that expression is. And
Yeah.
I could even go a step further, and I can say that it is quite likely that there are pockets of the universe, perhaps even most of the universe, where that light will straight up never reach like the light from that one galaxy in one corner of the universe will just
Hmm.
never reach our galaxy. So we will never know anything about that entire galaxy within our universe. And that
Right.
still has existence. We will just never
Existing.
know it does. We'll never know it. But I think that there are things that are true that we will never know.
Right. Okay. So that's a good place. And then the true and false, I asked, do you want to answer it again? Or I kind of heard what you said, but do you want to answer it really quickly?
Yeah, so when I think of something as being true versus false, now true and false is not something that is about objects. It's about propositions. So like it wouldn't make sense to be like, hey, Mark is true. Like,
Right.
well, no, Mark's not true. Mark's also not false. Mark's not a proposition, so Mark is neither true nor false, right? Mark is a person. But the statement "it is raining outside" is indeed, for me in my local geography, false right now. So statements are
Okay.
true and statements are false. But what it means for a statement to be true or false is that that statement accurately reflects reality, or in the case of it being false, that statement does not accurately reflect reality.
Hold on. I'm just going to make a note because I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I do have a question for that. So
Oh,
let
sure,
me
yeah.
just give me about 10 seconds.
No problem at all. While you're pulling that up, Gary and Colin both say that these are hefty questions and good questions, respectively. And Daniel says that for the record, his guitar does change when he leaves the room. So thank you for, for letting us know. I wish mine would like change their strings, for instance, but they don't. I have to do that. I'm gonna review my
All
questions for
right.
you. Oh, you're good.
Yeah. So then the next thing. So we agree on pretty much all that. The only thing I'd add is the true and false thing. Um, this is always a tough one when you hear my truth versus the truth, big T truth. I think the only way that we can, as well, I'm gonna leave Christianity out of it for now, but the only way that a person, one of the subjects in this universe, can make a big T truth statement is to appeal to a higher being than ourselves. Because what I think what people are saying when they say something is big T truth or objectively true is that um, it aligns with the creator's view and opinion, if you would even say that. But that we're not going to go too deep into that. But that's the difference between what I would say between someone's subjective truth and something like a well, yeah. I guess I'll stand by that objective truth. But the next question said, Well, this actually works because this is what I wrote down. To what degree do we? To what degree do you believe we give meaning to the words in our language? And once a word is established, like rain, for instance, what do you think it has? Do you think it has meaning outside the mind or the user speaking the word?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And my answer should hopefully be fairly simple. I think that words are our playthings, and they only mean what you and I agree that they mean. What are words really? They are wiggly air, right? So, with my vocal cords, I'm able to vibrate the air molecules that are going to bounce through. In this case, they're going to bounce into my microphone, which then turns into an electronic signal, and then that noise is reproduced and it hits your ears. But at the end of the day, it's
Yeah.
wiggly air. There is no objective meaning to the sounds that I produce with my vocal cords. They only mean what you and I agree that they mean. If you're not a
Okay.
fluent Spanish speaker, then you probably wouldn't agree that gato means cat. But if you are a fluent Spanish speaker, then you probably would agree that gato means cat. And so if I started pulling out words in a language that nobody speaks except for me, you'd be like, um, you're not making any sense, Kevin. Um, and I could be
Like
like,
the
well,
tongues, like speaking in
oh,
tongues.
sure. I just even meant like, just, anything.
Yeah, no, I was just
Um,
thinking.
yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that words have any meaning outside of what you and I agree that they mean.
Okay. Um, I do disagree with that, but I'm not going to make a rebuttal because I agree with basically what everything you said. It's just a kind of like a platonic appeal to like a world of forms idea that I have based with language. It's just my experience that words. I used to think about this thought experiment. Like, what if we just changed like a curse word to like the, or another noun with like a curse word? Would it really like? Could we really condition ourselves to speak that way and think it's normal? And obviously, we're all hugely biased, but from studying music and especially I'm terrible at language. I'm never going to say that I studied language, but when I was in like paramedic school, we would have etymology, and there's derivatives of words, and certain words mean certain things. And I think obviously the phrasing's different, they sound different, but I think the thing that they're getting at is, like you said, they're tools, but they're pointing to a thing in some ethereal plane that is real but not detectable. And that's really new agey and weird. So that's why I'm not going to sit down here and say like, well, I know this is true. This is just what I believe. So we can uh, like basically agree to disagree and also agree that your explanation is I'm going to admit that your explanation is more plausible and holds closer to parsimony, although that doesn't always equivalate it being true. And right,
No, that's exactly right. I think that sometimes people put parsimony on a pedestal where it's like
right,
parsimony at all costs. And
yeah,
that's not the right way to go about it. Like parsimony, what we really should be gauging here is explanatory power for parsimony. And we want to maximize both explanatory power and parsimony. So if we're offering this super parsimonious explanation, but the explanatory power is just not there, it's like, what's the point of
yeah,
that? So that's
yeah.
a very good point. And Colin just points out that this whole discussion that we're having is nominalism versus
Oh
realism.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that,
Yep.
yeah. That was what sparked it because after we had talked, I saw a video of yours on nominalism, and I had never heard what nominalism means, so I had to research it. And like I said before, you seem to be pretty. And I was going to ask you about your background in philosophy. You seem to be pretty, um, at least well learned, um,
Have you fooled?
and and as far as terminology at least goes. But I'm kind of the opposite. I've thought extremely deeply on a lot of these topics, but I never had terminologies to put with them. So I wouldn't consider myself a novice in these ideas, but a lot of these words, like even things like fallacies, like certain fallacies, like I haven't heard of them in a secular sense before. But yeah, so I have a cursory knowledge of philosophy, but not in the like actual studied sense. Um,
And
but
and just to let you know, I have absolutely no background in philosophy. So my educational background, I went to a polytechnic institute for college. Polytechnic
yeah,
meaning they didn't offer anything that wasn't STEM. Even my elective courses were like it wasn't an ethics class; it was an engineering ethics class. And so my degree is
oh
in
wow,
chemical engineering.
yeah,
And so
makes sense.
the only training or education in philosophy is that I buy random philosophy books and I read them and I read articles and I watch videos and that's it.
I mean,
So,
that's as good as anyway. At least you're not being geared towards some certain belief. You're kind of free to learn, construct your own beliefs. So that's good.
yeah,
Uh,
pros and cons.
yeah, right. I know. There is pros and cons because I've done both, especially with medical training. And you quickly learn that you can't take medical advice from just every doctor that goes on YouTube and says makes some statement.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So the words thing, though, I mean, so like, listen, man, how deep do you want to take this? Because there's
All the
way like
way. All the way. Let's go.
do you
No
can
holds
do you
barred.
consider yourself like a very deep thinker? I've watched some of your conversations, and you keep making this reference. You're like, sorry, I think it was with the gentleman David Palman. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm dense. You're gonna need to repeat this. What do you mean by that?
I'm stupid. When I say that I'm dense, I just mean I'm
Stupid?
dumb. Yeah, I'm a very
Oh, okay.
shallow thinker. I so I'm partially joking. I do like to think that I think as hard as I can about some topics, but I also think that I have like an engineer's brain in a way,
Right.
which is great for like empirical problem solving stuff. But I think
Yeah.
that it gets in the way a lot of times in philosophy. Which
Yeah.
I think is good and bad, probably, right? Like it gives me a unique perspective, but I think that my unique perspective gets in the way sometimes. So I don't think I'm a particularly deep thinker. I think that I am just a curious person, and so I think as hard as I can. But I don't think my brain is that much bigger than than anybody else's. It might
You
be a little
know,
smoother too. It's cute.
I
It's cute and
I
smooth.
appreciate that. I think that's a very self-aware statement that you just made, and I mean, we'll see how accurate it is, but I think that's pretty like spot on with what I've seen. You have a very empirical way of ascertaining what something is true, but when it goes into realms of what I call the abyss, or just deep, like just word philosophy, pothead talk. If, it's hard to like ground yourself. Like that's like the word in spiritual, the spiritual word that they would use is being grounded, which you can go insane. Like there is a reason your brain is geared some way, because I've known people to go insane from researching some of these ideas. I don't know if I don't want to like blow up this kid's spot, but there is he came out with it on the internet. I don't know if you remember the video of the fourth dimension explained by a high schooler. It got like 100 million views on YouTube.
I don't think I saw it. I don't know.
Okay, it was a really viral video. This ninth grader explains the fourth dimension, and I was like recently the other day just wondering about that kid, and I ended up looking him up, and there was this big long story, but he ended up going like he was into some deep like quantum physics stuff, and he ended up going insane, and then kind of bouncing back now. Um, and I have my views on what that or how that happens, but just basically like we have what we have. I believe God gives us what we're meant to have, and we should exercise it with caution and responsibility. But so I don't want to like take you into some weirdo place where you're not comfortable going, and not even comfortable, but like you don't want to go. Like I'm not gonna, you know what I mean?
No, I like going in those weirdo places. And I
Yeah.
I have a whole reason why I'm like, sometimes I use the phrase I'm as close to an empiricist as you can be without literally being one. Um, and,
Okay.
and an empiricist is somebody who thinks that only empiricism is like an acceptable way to arrive at a conclusion. Um,
So that's an epistemology, right?
yeah,
That's like their view of epistemology would be empiricism.
Yep. As
Um,
opposed to the rationalists. The rationalists are the people who aren't empiricists, and they think that there's other ways to arrive at justified true beliefs, such as introspection.
does it ever? Is there another term for people that maybe take that too far and maybe put too much uh, faith on self anecdotal experiential um, yeah, like experiences?
Well, I mean, empiricism is kind of all about like empiricism means like your personal experiences, right? Like it's like sensory perception. That's kind of like where
But
the
it can be demonstrated, right?
correct. Yeah,
It's
that's
demonstrated. What about people that would be like, I'm thinking of two, like you on one side, the engineering mind versus like the pseudo spiritual person that you know is talking about all chakras and all these things that you may or may not be able to explain, but they believe them because they feel them or something.
yeah, I don't know. I guess I would just call them rationalists as opposed to empiricists.
Okay.
But then I would just say that
All right. I was just
they're
curious.
confused about a lot of things. you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know.
all right. So, all right, let's the what I wrote down was, so when you say something about raining being an objectively verifiable occurrence or phenomenon, we we go like that gentleman said right into nominalism versus realism. So raining, the word raining, did we invent that word? Uh, are we the subjects who are defining it, creating it, and basically have complete possession over everything that it means? Or are we using it as, or are we using language as a tool to get to a deeper truth, big T truth about reality? What do you think about that?
I guess I'm not entirely sure what the difference between big T truth and little T truth would be. Um, but I think I can
Okay.
answer your question kind of regardless, I think. Um, so I would say that raining, it like what raining, not the word, like the event. Raining is something that happens in reality, and then that word raining is how you and I communicate to each other that that event in reality is indeed occurring. So
Okay.
you and I do own that word in the sense that like if you and I decided that schmaining is actually the correct word and that raining is gibberish, like
Right.
very well, then schmaining is now the right word and raining is now gibberish.
But that water that is falling is a very real, observable, demonstratable thing. And
Mhm.
the word rain we're using to kind of encapsulate this. I don't know if you'd call it an experience or a phenomena, but
Either, yeah.
we're limiting reality. So this word is basically boxing up a piece of reality and demonstrating it in a form of densely packed information that we can then hand to someone else.
Yeah, it's all about convenience and communication. That's what language is. Um, and our language is never going to perfectly describe reality.
Right.
Um, but as long as the language that we use is close enough, then we're good. Like you and I can communicate as long as we agree that the words are a close enough approximation to reality. But words will never be reality, right? So.
Okay. And the last question I asked is reality solely dependent on our perception or our perception of it? or does a reality exist outside of the individual spectator? We kind of briefly talked about this already.
Yeah, and I would just hold that reality has nothing to do at all with the spectator. So whether or not the spectator is there, reality is what it is. And there's actually
Okay.
like super interesting stuff that kind of like, that comes from this assertion. Like the assertion that I made here sounds non-controversial, but it does have consequences, such as like color doesn't really exist because color is
I
something
was
that
going to
is
say that.
only perceived, right, by humans.
Hmm.
What does exist? Light. And light
Hmm.
has wavelengths. When light of a certain wavelength hits our eye, our brain produces the perception that we refer to as color. Um, so would like if you ask me, is color an actual like part of reality? I would say no, color is not an actual part of reality. However,
Okay.
photons of light are an actual part of reality, and photons really do have wavelength. So
Right. So I I think I agree with you, but I maybe like you to rephrase when you say color doesn't actually exist. So you're talking about photons, and you're talking about, I don't know the actual the actual like mathematics of it, but if let's call like blue 64, okay, whatever that would mean. It's a mathematical expression of light being expressed to us. Do you think just because our senses view it as blue and it looks that way to us, do you think that there's a reality outside of our senses that's being communicated to us?
yes. So the
Yeah.
reality is that there is some kind of collection of atoms,
Hmm.
and there are photons that are bouncing off that collection of atoms, and then as they're bouncing off, some of the energy in the photons is being transmitted into those atoms, and that energy that's
Yep.
left over is then in the photon, and that's what that's determining the wavelength, and then that photon hits our eye, and then our brains decipher the wavelength of that photon through color. So there is an objective reality, and the objective reality is the atoms and the photons, and of course, the atoms are made up of like little pieces called quarks and stuff like that too. And now we even think that quarks are actually just excitations inside of fields. So maybe at the base of it, it's all fields. Maybe it's not even actually like particles. That doesn't
We're
really matter
talking
for
quantum physics, right?
yeah, which I don't even understand. And I have a degree in chemical engineering. And
Okay.
my quack detector always goes off whenever anybody starts talking about quantum physics, as if they know it,
Good.
and if they don't have a degree in
Good.
quantum physics, because
Okay.
I know enough about it to know how much there is to know and how much I don't know, even though I have a degree in chemical engineering. You know what I mean? So when somebody without a
Yeah.
degree in any kind of engineering or any science starts talking about quantum physics, I'm like, buddy, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I have a little different of a view, because I have a friend that's kind of similar to you. He's a bioengineer, or chemical engineer, or biochem something. I don't even know. He was working on like vaccines and stuff.
Oh,
But
that's what I do.
he's really, oh,
Yeah,
cool.
I work in pharma. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So so you guys are very similar. He's a really smart guy, and it's kind of like you said, like he's sometimes so smart that he can miss plain truths that may seem obvious because of mental bias that can block his critical thinking. And then you have people that are generally viewed as either unintelligent or dumb, and they have this depthness to them sometimes that, if you look at like poets, oh, sorry, I'm reading, poets or
Biomedical engineer,
musicians.
maybe.
What's that?
Biomedical engineer.
Yeah, probably
Cool.
biomedical. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. Um, but yeah, that they display this intellect that you know, some can be seen as like a space cadet, but they're picking up on some part of reality that the, you know, empiricist guys aren't. Um, so when I briefly talked to him about quantum physics, he views it as this like, don't go there. None of us are smart enough to enter there. You probably agree, right? Um,
Yeah.
but the way I view it is, I think it's communicating truths that are rather obvious in in spirituality. Do you want me to stop there before I explain more?
No, go ahead.
So a lot of the stuff, like talking about observers, and again, I'm one of these people that maybe think I know what they're talking about, but maybe don't. But what the message that I'm seeing when I study this stuff, when I get it presented to me, um, the explanations that they give, it's almost like they have scientific explanation for things that I already think are obvious, and a lot of people think are obvious, that I don't really need a scientific explanation for. But for some reason, that's just this gross amount of evidence for them, and it's alarming in their minds.
Yeah,
Do you notice that?
so I heard something about the observer effect in there. Are you referring to this idea in like pop culture about how an observer can actually change, like how a certain, for instance,
Yep.
slit experiment? So did you know
Yep.
that a rock can be an observer?
Yep.
Okay. So what's happening here is there's no like perception going on here. What's happening is that
Right.
matter is interacting with other matter. So
Right.
this is one of those things that I like. It's kind of uh, like a
That's
soapbox.
exactly
So
my point. Yeah, that's exactly my point, though. I think, like, I imagine a room of four people, and now I'm gonna get a little spiritual because we're
hey,
so
this
we're
is a
having a
Catholic YouTube channel. Get
yeah,
spiritual. Let's do it.
we're having a conversation with four people, and there's, you know, it's going in a certain direction, and we're saying certain things, and there's this fourth person that doesn't utter one word. He's just sitting there, but just merely by him sitting there, he is influencing this conversation with either energy that he's putting off from his emitting from his being, or his thoughts, how he's understanding the information that's being brought to him, and he is actually contributing to the reality, get reality, of that situation. That's all that it seems like they're saying to me when they're noticing differences in this double split, this double blind experiment, is that they're noticing a change when someone observes it rather than when there's allegedly no observer. That's all that I got from that.
So two quick things. I'm actually right there with you in terms of like that fourth silent person affects the conversation of the other three who are actually talking. And
Yep.
here's the thing, I'm actually going to go like further than that. Is it's like a thing in human psychology that we know that people change the way that they behave when they know that they're being watched, stuff like that. So like
Right.
the empiricist is going to be quite happy to be there like, no, yeah, absolutely, that fourth person does indeed. And we don't need to talk about chakras or anything like that. Like
Right.
we can be totally scientific, empirical about this and say that that fourth person absolutely affects the world around him. Even without speaking, he does this. Even if that
Mm.
fourth person was just a camera and these three people knew that they were being recorded,
Right.
they would
Yeah.
behave differently if they knew that they were being watched. That's absolutely the case. You're 100% correct. Um, now,
Yeah.
what's happening with the double slit experiment is not any different, really. There are empirical interactions when we have mass nearby. So that observer could be a rock. Like you could have
Yeah.
a vacuum. You could do this slit experiment inside of a vacuum and you could put a rock in there or you could put a human being in there of equal mass and
Hmm.
the effect is going to be the exact same. So
Yeah.
the observer effect in physics is actually not nearly as spooky as people think that it
Spooky.
is.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to like de-spookify that. Like, let's think of an idea like a crystal, a rock crystal, a salt rock. Um, there's like a whole, study of art and feng shui, as relating to how your environment can change the way you feel. I think that's not a crazy thing to accept for an empiricist. So let's like think about what that actually means, though. So I go into my room and there's just crap all over the place. There's Doritos, there's stinky laundry. It's just a complete mess. Now, obviously, I am experiencing it through my senses, but also that's going to change chemically, neurotransmitters in my brain. That's going to produce a different effect for my cells to pick up, as far as every cell and fiber of my being, my DNA is going to react in a different way than if things were to be neat, tidy, and maybe I'll have a salt rock, there that's, balancing my energy, or whatever. But when you think about it like that, and that there's some sort of, I would say divine, I don't want to say divine order, but order to our reality. Um, I think that's really the like the golden nugget that they're getting out of that whole thing. I don't think you need to be able to observe quartz in a double-blind study at the quantum level, and I would argue that it's actually dangerous to go into that realm. And I am a firm, I'm firmly against uh, quantum physics in the practice of it, and in well, let's see, yeah, basically in the practice of it. Do you
I don't know if I
you can
understand that
guess
last
why?
part at all. If I'm being honest, what does it mean to be
Really
like? What do you mean?
firmly against it?
Yeah, what does that mean? I don't know if I get that at all.
Well, from a, I don't know if you're gonna, if it would be religious, but even even not religious, if we were just like sitting in a room and there's like a bunch of scientists, and I'm one of them, so I can weigh in on this, and they're like, hey, there's this phenomenon that we can, this door of physics and metaphysics that we can open, and no one's ever done it before. um, should we just like crack open this door to the abyss that, we have no idea what could come out of it? Yeah, no, I don't think that's a great idea. I think on the, just from a safety point of view, I don't think opening portals, you can imagine, you can go every sci-fi movie, black holes, aliens, like whatever. I just don't think we get anything out of going into that realm. And there's other people that are like, no, this is great. This is going to be the savior. This is how we're going to cure all diseases. And there's that view. And I just am of a more conservative view that it's better left untouched. You can call me anti-intellectual, anti scientific, or whatever. I think there's a practice of science that's um, ethically safe. And then there's this other practice of experimentation that can be that of close to like some Frankenstein thing.
The name of the Greek philosopher is going to escape me, but there was this Greek philosopher who, like, um, we have the writings of his students. We don't have his writings because he was anti-writing. He was talking about
Oh, yeah.
how writing is going to ruin future generations because they no longer need to memorize things. This new technology, these stone tablets that we're writing on, are better left untouched. Let's not even go there. And that's what I'm reminded of. like,
Okay.
why, I guess, what are your thoughts about the Industrial Revolution? You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
why quantum physics? Like, that seems like a just a arbitrary place.
yeah. Well, quantum physics, partially because I see it being closely tied to witchcraft. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, it does. It
Yeah.
does.
Do you think witchcraft is just some spooky like BS that just the Catholics kind of just labeled as heretics because they didn't understand it? Or do you think there was any um,
let me
I already know that you don't think witchcraft works.
right. So let me approach this charitably. I do think that I think that the witchcraft the witchcraft stuff is equally as real as like Catholic sacraments in the sense that they they have an
Okay.
effect on people, right? Like rituals are a very human thing and they affect us. And so you legitimately might be in a crappy mood and then you go to mass and you feel better if you're Catholic. You might be in a
Okay.
crappy mood if you're a pagan and you do a ritual, like a witch ritual or whatever, and you
Yeah.
feel better.
Kill a pig,
Um
something. Yeah.
yeah, I mean maybe something less violent than that. Maybe you just like burn some incense or something. But
Yeah.
regardless,
Yeah. Yeah.
um and then you feel better because of it. So there's real effects. Like these rituals have real like empirically verifiable effects. Um
Do you think that's what the practice of witchcraft was meant to do? Is make you feel better?
I don't think that we can talk about witchcraft like a monolith. Like I think that a lot of modern
Well, there is a
practices.
study of it. There is. I know you haven't done that study, but um, I have done a little bit, and it's not too far off from like the law of attraction, new age stuff that you'll see around the internet nowadays. Um,
Do
but
you
the difference,
do you know like witches personally? Because I do know a few, and they would all
like
they're
white
all
witches, like that, they'll
I don't
say
know.
white magic.
I have
It's
no idea.
it goes back to like Solomon's temple, like the biblical Solomon, and like if you want to honestly like a really brief history of witchcraft. So Solomon had a lot of wisdom. David's son Solomon. That whole seal of Solomon is the Star of David. Also, inverting it is the pentagram, inverted pentagram that the witches like hail. Freemasonry, witchcraft, hermetics. Are you familiar with these ideas?
Only passingly. No.
Are you getting uninterested or uncomfortable?
No, I kind of just think this is really funny. I don't think that any like I
Okay.
these witches that I know personally have never once said anything to me about Solomon
Uh,
ever. Like
well, okay. Well, you've heard of the pentagram. They may not know, but so this whole idea of Solomon is he had this power over demons, and that pentagram was his signet, which gave him this power, and he got this from a higher demon, which I think is Lucifer, um, and all this mysticism and mystery schools, Kabbalah, Hermetics. A lot of it goes back to ancient Babylon, and beyond that, Solomon and the with the Freemason stuff. I don't want to just throw out names that you haven't heard of, but there's some like allegories, and then there's some actual practice. But witchcraft is definitely, I think it's a real thing. Um, I didn't want to do this, but
can
we're going into the
can
whole
you tell me about the protocols of the elders of Zion?
Elders of Zion. Is that did you look up Solomon?
Nope. I don't know what that is, but the chat asked me to ask you about the protocols of the elders of Zion.
I don't know what the protocols
I don't
are.
either.
I haven't, but I'll tell you that witchcraft back then, like the what the Catholic Church was viewing as heretics and was killing at the stake, which I don't agree that you should kill them.
Ben brings up a really good point. The real witches would never tell me about the Solomon stuff. I'm not a witch myself. You have to be a witch first, then they tell you the secrets about Solomon.
Yeah, yeah, you need
Great
the
point.
secrets.
Great point.
Yeah. Well, wait, what was I saying? Yeah, the witchcraft is basically very close to like science. There was you have to like just like okay, so you'll relate to this. You've done experiments in a lab, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what happens if you're like a deciliter off on a certain compound or chemical?
I guess it
Like
depends on the reaction. It either like won't
it can
happen or it'll happen a lot more violently than we thought it would,
right.
or
Yeah, so like they looked at it the same way. Like they were extremely compulsive about the amounts. Like you have to have this much of this much of that, and then it would get this reaction. Close to like pharmaceuticals, and that's why a lot of, like you're talking about, trad Catholics being against pharmaceuticals and seeing it as witchcraft. It if you want to take it, if you want to take that philosophy, I mean, you would have to say that, you know, pharmaceuticals are witchcraft and we shouldn't be practicing it. I'm not gonna like make an argument for why you should or shouldn't take drugs, or, you know, big pharma versus, you know, the evils of big pharma or whatnot. But I don't know. I feel like we got a little off track here. But
I think we did, but I'm interested. Wait, so
yeah, you
and
like this stuff?
how is quantum physics like witchcraft?
Okay,
That's where I'm still
witchcraft.
at.
Okay, so I think it's portals, right? So we're communicating. So there's a veil. I know. So I'm gonna have to talk a lot. I know where your mind is thinking. It's hard for me psychologically when I know what someone's objections may be. So I'm gonna have to say a bunch of things that you're gonna reject for me to get to my point, or
Give
else
me
I'm
the
never gonna
sign
get.
when you're done, and I just won't interrupt until you say, "Okay, bam, got it."
No,
Thank you.
you're not gonna interrupt. It's just hard for me to like um, keep talking with a stream of thoughts while having you listen, where I know you're like, well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. So let me just lay it out. Okay.
Look, here's what we'll
So
do. You don't even have to look at me if I.
no, it's fine. It's
Okay,
fine.
all right. Let me change the scene.
So I'm just warning you. I'm going to say a lot of things that you're going to not agree with. So I believe God created our reality and our dimensions that we live in, from first dimension, second dimension, third dimension, fourth dimension. I think there's, from my guess, well, there's definitely more than four dimensions, but from biblical scholars, I would put it at 10 dimensions. And coincidentally, that's what the quantum physicists have agreed. I know they've changed. I know that some are saying 16, 17, upwards. They just keep throwing things out. But there is a scholar, Nachmanides, a Hebrew scholar, and he studied Genesis, and he ascertained that every time God spoke in Genesis, there was a new dimension being created. So back in the year around 1200, I believe, Nachmanides, somewhere around that time, he proposed that there was 10 dimensions of reality. Later, 800, 900 years later, the quantum physicists say the same thing. So it's hard to think past four. And I've had this conversation with my friend that is briefly learned on quantum physics. And I can't conceptualize past four, because then it starts just becoming derivatives of time. And it's like, well, you can reverse time in this way, and then you can reverse time. And it doesn't make sense, because I don't think we have any idea. Even our minds can't even conceptualize it. But I think that when we were fallen, when we ate from the tree and our fallen nature was given to us, God limited us to four dimensions. So, as our current practices of science and observability, we are only able to observe four dimensions, the fourth being time. Now, I think that other dimensions exist, and those are the realms of the supernatural. Another word that I don't like is the word supernatural, because in most secular groups, in the populist consensus is that there's some spooky magic going on that's like abracadabra, voila, and just something happens, like, or miracles, even miracles. The way that we understand them, because we're seeing them in our reality, in our three-dimensional or four-dimensional world, it looks like they're just appearing out of thin air, or they're breaking or defying the laws of physics. I don't think supernatural events break laws of physics. I think they interact with them on a higher dimension. So the other point I'd like to make is I used to think, can God do something like stop a car? So like we've heard the stories of like the infant being under a car, or something collapses on a person and they they survive, even though all physics and science would show that the car should have crushed them unless there was some intervention. Now, if you, let's say that that occurrence did happen, let's say that that what I said was true, that this event took place, and God were to be the person that were to have interfered with that car, does that mean that somehow he violated the laws of nature because he didn't allow the physical matter to crush the person? I would say no. I would say he had to physically put his hand out into creation and stop it. I don't think he can do things without doing them, if you understand what I mean by that. Like, God has to act, and the supernatural has to act just as we act. I can't stop this from falling without catching it. I'm interfering with it. The supernatural is the same way. It's just happening on a dimension higher than we're able to perceive it. So that's just to despookify it. Like, to them, whoever they are, the gods, angels, beings, that aliens, this, the whole alien things, they're when they tell us, when they reveal to us their actual nature, it's going to be from a higher dimension, or they're going to be presented in a sort of higher intelligence. They're not going to be lower intelligence than us. I guarantee you, that's just a prediction of mine, but they're 100%, in my belief, going to be presented as higher dimensional beings. And they're going to have this knowledge, and we're going to learn from them, blah, 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 whatever. But that's the way. So I don't like that word supernatural, because the way it's perceived in most people's minds. The reason why I talk about the dimensions, and God puts a veil on our dimension, and he tells us not to open the door, not to explore it. He tells us this through his revelation to the Jews, not Christians, the Jews, forbidding them from doing things like magic, necromancy, witchcraft, talking to the dead, talking to spirits, all these things that you don't believe, I know. But he forbids us from opening that door. And I think the act of quantum physics is quite literally, in the secular scientific realm, opening that door without the spooky magic. It's basically rebranded witchcraft. And if you hear some of these guys talk, like you said, they act as if they know things that they either don't have the qualifications to know, or are talking out of their asses. I agree, they might not be talking out of their asses. They're probably talking out of some spiritual beliefs that are not rooted in science and not rooted in empirical evidence. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Are you good for me to jump in?
Jump in.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Before we go anywhere, I've got to say, you've got some serious fans in the live chat. So
I didn't see it.
let me pull up a comment. Grace said that you have that fourth dimensional riz, and I couldn't agree more. Mark got that fourth dimensional riz. You do, my guy. You've got that fourth dimensional riz.
Don't know what that means, but I'll take it.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. You've got
Okay.
that fourth dimensional riz. Colin said he's high right now, and you're low key making a lot of sense. So hey, it's working. It's working.
Yeah.
Okay. So couple thoughts. Got a few of them percolating.
Okay.
Backwards first, I guess. people absolutely do talk out of their ass. You're absolutely right about that. Um, but I'm going to challenge you if you think that.
I may be doing it right now.
Hey, we all do it sometimes. Um, if you think though that quantum physics is all, you know, all of it is talking out of all of the quantum physicists' asses.
No, no, I didn't say that.
Okay, go ahead and correct me.
The reason why I said I'm against it is because I think it's opening that door. It's breaching the veil that God has put for our safety.
I mean,
And our
evidently he
safety
didn't put a veil there, right? Because we are able to see through it, or I guess because
through
didn't he put a
no.
veil against like machinery and stuff, but we just pierced that veil in the 1500s.
Are you saying like through our physical like exploration of exercising our knowledge? I wouldn't consider that witchcraft.
What's the difference? Like, why is a crossbow? Why is a crossbow not
Mm.
witchcraft, but a the Large Hadron Collider is witchcraft, for instance? Like, why is the Large Hadron Collider
Well,
different than
okay,
a crossbow?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. So there's stipulations in the Bible that he talks about God. When I say he, that he talks about if you're communicating with a being through some means of magic or incantation, instantly I'm going to call that witchcraft, and it's dangerous. If you're just doing nonsense and try and kind of studying the universe, I think that's much safer.
What,
And
what do you think quantum? What do you think quantum physics is?
well, yeah, as of now, but I think what the danger of it, I think the danger of it is that we actually might breach some sort of communication with other beings like aliens, and yeah, this is where it's.
Wait, so we
What are your
can't.
thoughts?
Wait, hold on. So we shouldn't do quantum physics because we might be able to figure out a way to communicate with
To contact.
aliens.
Well, I mean that's my view. I'm not going to say like, so when you say we shouldn't do it, like I don't think anyone's going to take that advice. Like I don't
I don't
expect
think so either.
scientists.
But this is your
I
stance,
wouldn't
right?
even want them to. They're going to
I'm
do
sorry.
what
I
they're
thought
going
that
to
you
do.
were. I thought that you were opposed to. Like, I thought that if it was up to you, like if you could wave a magic wand and stop everyone from researching
I
quantum
wouldn't do it.
physics.
I wouldn't
Oh,
do
so
it.
you're not anti quantum physics?
Well, it's hard when you say like anti. Like I don't think a Christian should be involved in quantum physics in the sense of let's see. I'll probably like have to like dial in like my view on this,
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
I
No,
base yeah, I just I don't think we should be endeavoring into spooky realms that are unknown to us and piercing veils of the going into the supranatural, which are like higher dimensions than we're limited to. Um, Also, God doesn't talk about quantum physics, so I'm not saying God said this. This is just my intuition, purely intuition. That's another thing. Like this is purely intuitive. I just don't have a good feeling about it, to be honest. I don't think anyone's should take that. I think take it for a grain of salt. But I think if you look at these all the people studying it, it usually ends up tying back into New Age, and that's where I'm very suspicious as a Christian.
it absolutely does not. I don't know what quantum physics you're reading. There's nothing new age about actual quantum physics. There is a lot of new age people who try to claim quantum physics like proves
Right?
their point, and that's all
Okay.
nonsense. But
I
there's
could change my view on this.
yeah.
I could change. I'm not willing to die on this hill, but it's just what I've seen of you know, at least the way it's been presented to me, or from, maybe it's the wrong people. Maybe I'm listening to just people that are presenting it to me in the wrong way. But yeah. So I'd be willing
You ever
to die
use
with
Google Scholar?
yeah, sometimes.
Just go onto Google Scholar and just type in the word quantum and then just start reading and just see what you think. Like, see if it seems new agey to you, and see
Okay.
there's publicly available scientific journal articles about a ton of quantum stuff. You can read to your heart's content on Google Scholar about quantum
Yeah.
physics, and then I'll just ask you after you've read 3 articles, or
Yeah.
one, just read one, and then just see, does this seem new agey witchcraft to you?
It probably wouldn't if I were to guess. It's more of like the implications that they derive from the knowledge they get in quantum physics, and this is the problem that I have with it. Is it goes back to like law of attraction,
Okay.
and
So Rosemary had
I don't.
a comment earlier about the law of attraction that I think applies here, and I'm not going to be able to find it now because it was a while ago. But Rosemary said, "I've
We're
heard the
breaking
law of
up
it."
right now.
Oh, okay. Um,
Do you see that, or is that just on me?
it might be on your end, but um, the law of attraction has absolutely no scientific like standing. Like, it's not a real thing in science. Um, So, like, quantum physics has absolutely nothing to do with the law of attraction. The law of
Do you
attraction
think
is like
that
new
someday?
age
Do you think
stuff.
someday that quantum physics could prove law of attraction?
I don't see how it could.
No,
I mean, I don't want to say never, like, never say
I
never,
think
I
it could.
guess, but
I think that's the direction that it's going in. I don't. I mean, I'll look. I'm saying a lot that I haven't researched yet, but from what I see, I think there's reasons behind a lot of stuff and a lot of these pushes towards science, and I do think it's a place that should be taken seriously, and caution, like caution should be used, great caution, because I mean you hear like Elon Musk talk. We heard about how he was cautioning against AI, and now there's just this boom, and we'll see what So far, people are liking it. I don't know what it's going to do to the educational system. Um,
to be clear, Elon Musk's caution about AI is very like human, and he thinks that people will use AI for like malicious purposes and stuff like that. And this seems like
right.
a very different kind of concern than the
Then mine. Oh
concern
yeah,
that we
yeah,
might
definitely.
find a way to communicate with aliens and stuff like that. Like, it seems very
Yeah.
different.
Um, well, you do know my view on aliens, right?
I
So
don't know if I
when
do.
I talk,
Rosemary very kindly said that she just thinks that quantum physics is not woo and the law of attraction is. And she recommends Sean Carroll as a good source. Sean Carroll is a science communicator. He's also like a PhD physicist of some kind. And I know him mostly through like shows on like the Science Channel and stuff like that. Like, he like narrates
okay.
like science shows and stuff. But he's got lectures on YouTube and stuff too. So Sean Carroll is a good resource. He's the real
Um,
deal. He's not woo. He's an actual
yeah,
physicist.
yeah. Sorry, what was the last thing that you said?
I think we were talking about how like Elon Musk's concern about
Right.
AI is very different than your concern about quantum
Okay, so
physics.
yeah, you know my view on aliens from, do you remember what I said last time?
Remind me? I don't know if I remember.
Well, I mean, I think aliens, I don't want to call them demons because it's,
Yes. Sorry.
yeah,
Now I remember. But the audience may like we I think that we have members in the audience who didn't tune in last time. So why don't you rehash that real quick?
well, actually, I'm curious to hear what the trad cath view of aliens is, because this is a world that you have a lot more experience in this world than I, even though I probably agree with them more than you do, obviously.
Well, yeah, I'm not trad anymore. But um I don't know that there is a trad view on aliens. I think that for most of the trads, they're just like way too concerned with like what Pope Francis had for lunch than all their energy is spent complaining about Vatican II. So they don't think about
Okay.
think about aliens too much.
Well,
Um the only thing
from
that I
what
used to hear like when I was trad about aliens is like they probably don't exist, but if they do, Jesus probably appeared to them too. I bet you if aliens ever showed up on Earth in a flying saucer, they would have a copy of the New Testament with them, and they'd be like, "Oh, you guys worship Jesus too? That's so cool." And that's literally it. That's the only thing that I ever heard about aliens ever.
Are you familiar with a Christian, Stephen Bancars?
I don't think so.
He's about your age. Actually, he kind of fell off YouTube, but you should check out his testimony and see what you think if you're curious. He's a really smart guy, and he was in the New Age. He went from the New Age to being a Christian, and he has experience with a lot of
Cat
stuff.
tax
Cat,
is important. I'm
yeah,
sorry. I don't make the rules. It's the internet.
yeah. He uh, he has some experience, and a lot of my beliefs. You talk about. So I want to reference some debates. And are you familiar with a guy, Matt Dillahunty?
Oh yeah, of course. From the atheist
Right.
experience.
Yeah. He had a couple conversations with um, a young guy, Michael Jones from the
Oh,
Inspiring
inspiring philosophy.
Philosophy.
Yeah, I've
Yep.
spoken with Michael Jones.
Oh, really? Yeah. He's so he talks a little bit about the quantum physics stuff to a more deeper extent than we just brushed on.
I,
But
I
I
I
think
like
he would.
Michael a lot.
Yep.
He has no educational background in quantum physics.
But does it really, do you really need one?
In quantum
If
physics,
he's stud
yes.
But who like see you're wouldn't that be a classic appeal to authority?
Yes.
Okay, and I realize it can be valid, and you're admitting that it's valid. But do you think there's a difference between someone studying in university that is just objectively better and more true than someone diligently studying on their own?
Uh, do I think that there's any difference at all? Like, yeah, I think one.
Objectively, do you think that the person that studies at university is going to have more objective truth? If you even see, these are why I had to define these words in the beginning, because if we're going to even begin to have this conversation, we need to establish that there is an objective truth to our reality, which I think we did,
Yeah.
right? So we
Right.
can use that word now interchangeably. We both know what that means.
Yeah. I think that the students who study quantum physics in university are going to wind up with more true beliefs than people who study it outside
Okay.
of university. Because I just think it's going to be way harder to learn about it without studying under like PhDs in the field. Like, what, you're just going to read a textbook and just understand it? Like, good luck. Jeez.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with to a certain extent. I mean, I know when I studied, so I had my my experience of medicine. I got Lyme disease really bad and was extremely sick for a long time. So I was like forced into the medical field. I didn't particularly have a niche or a passion or interest for it, but out of necessity, I was forced to look at, things like leaky gut, dysbiosis, and all of these things relating to my symptoms, physical symptoms that I needed to define. And I spent probably about 3 or 4 years diligently studying. And then when I went and got, some actual college, I had college experience before, but I didn't take it seriously. So now I went back to do another degree, and then learned it in the college level, and everything. It was like shining light on all of the mystery that I didn't understand, because there was so many conflicting things when you research yourself. So there is definitely truth to that. Um, but I don't think that the truth that you find on your own is less valid than the truth that you obtain in university. I think when someone really connects or believes something, whether it is through reading a book or whether it's being taught to them, I think that synchronicity within themselves is just as valid, however they obtain it. Um, I still do agree though. Um, it's much better to have peers. I mean, we know this even in Christianity. You don't just read the Bible yourself and stay alone. You have to, be in a community where people can check you. So yeah, um, I agree with that. Uh,
quick 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 comment there is you said something like the truth that you arrive at by yourself is not going to be any like different than the truth that you arrive at like at university. And like yeah, but you also presuppose that both of these people are arriving at truth. I think it's a lot harder to arrive at the truth on your own than it is at university, because at university you're going to
let's
have
take out truth and replace it with believe it's true.
well, I think
Does that
that
work?
yeah, I think that you're going to wind up believing more things that are true and disbelieving more things that are false at university. And I think that if you study it on your own, you're going to wind up believing some things that are false and you're going to wind up not believing some things that are true. Why? Because you just didn't have access to all the stuff that the people at university had access to.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue it depends who you are, but even depending who you are, I think roughly you're going to probably find more things that you think are BS and you might be turned off from studying if you just learn yourself. And that's definitely was my experience. It just got to the point where like you talk about food intolerances, and luckily I don't know your background, but I'm guessing that you don't have experience with that, any like health disorders of food intolerances or anything.
My wife is gluten and lactose intolerant, but that's about
Okay,
it.
so slightly, but
Yeah.
when you're in this like food fearing mentality and you're researching every single phytonutrient that could possibly interact with your body and cause symptoms, you're literally not able to eat anything because there's a reason why you should not eat everything, whether it's vegan, whether it's, all meat. There's if you follow every diet, you won't eat anything. So,
Yeah, that's true.
um, so did you see the Alex O'Connor versus with Bart Ehrman? And do you know who Alex O'Connor is?
Yeah, cosmic
Same
skeptic.
last name.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
so my
cause
real last name is O'Connor. Um
yeah.
and so um I've never said this, but I'm going to say it now. It's a lie, but I'm going to say it. Alex is my younger brother. He's not, but I'm going to
Nice,
say it because we have
nice.
the same last name. Yeah, but I did see his interview with Bart Ehrman.
You have more muscle mass because you're not a vegan, but
I also probably weigh twice as much as he does, so I better be
you,
stronger.
I heard he's really tall. Actually, I
I'm
heard
six
he's
foot
like
two.
6'2".
I'm six
Oh,
two.
okay,
So,
all right, yeah.
and I probably legitimately weigh twice as much as he does. So I should be stronger. If I'm not stronger, there's a problem there. But
Yeah, that's it's a big big size there. Well, so that I really like you. So you saw that conversation. What did you think of his um, representation of Christianity? I thought it was extremely good. Actually, I was surprised. I was like, "Is this kid a Christian now?"
Alex O'Connor, yeah, well,
Yeah,
he has like Christian roommates, and he's got his degree in theology and stuff like that. So he like understands, and he grew up Catholic. I think he just stopped practicing at a young age. I think.
do you find a lot of similarities with him and his experience?
No, not a whole lot, because he never had the kind of upbringing that I did. Um, like growing up trad is pretty. I feel like my upbringing is probably closer to something like a Mormons or like an evangelical Protestants than
Really?
to somebody like Alex who kind of grew up nominally Catholic and then stopped practicing.
Yeah. Um, I was I was surprised when I so when we first talked, I thought you were, I guess, just a normal Catholic, um, going through the motions, and then you got to college and started questioning. But from what I've now researched, I mean, I was impressed at how many arguments you've heard, how much evidence you've seen, and not to like go right to the religion thing, but Saying all that, what is it that truly made you stray away? Was it your experience with the church, or was it fundamentally intellectual?
I would love to be able to say like, oh, it was entirely intellectual. It was, it was purely the teleology of, I would love to say that. Do I think that the intellectual part of it was absolutely one part of it? Like, yeah, for sure, it definitely was. However, was the fact that I was strong armed into a marriage at 22, does that also have something to do with it? Almost undoubtedly. Like, how could it not? You know what I mean? I think I would be dishonest if I was to say, like, that had zero impact on my thinking. Of course it had impact on my thinking. Now, let me try to give myself a little bit of credibility here. After I just destroyed all of my credibility, um, I was already, 1 foot out the door by then, and it was because I said like, "Hey, look, I'm not religious anymore." That's what caused me to get strong armed into a marriage at 22. So
And what did they say to you after you came? And not they as your parents, but even if you didn't specifically speak with some of the trad cath communities that you were involved in, what do you think would be their answer to why you chose that? Is it just classic? Well, you want to sin?
depends who you ask. Do they know me well? If they do, they would say like, "Oh no, Kevin probably like he thought about it and he decided like that he just doesn't believe it for whatever reason." If you talk to somebody who doesn't know me very well, they would say he just wants to sin.
Okay. Um, yeah, that's interesting. Um, so why do you consider yourself an anti-realist?
I mean, this is gonna sound like tautological, but it's because I just don't think that abstracta exist.
Well,
So
we were just talking about all of these things, and none of it seemed to scream anti-realism to me. We're talking about the guitar existing on its own without the spectator. I don't understand how that's anti-realism.
well, anti-realism or nominalism is just the idea that abstracta don't exist. Concreta can exist, and you're still considered an anti-realist.
But the abstract are you just we talked about it being a form of information being communicated. So the information that is experienced, does that exist?
So it depends on what you mean by information. If you take a reductive or an eliminatist view about this information, then I'm fine. But if you mean something kind of like a Platonic information, like Platonic math, then I would say no, I don't think that exists. But so, for instance, do you think that light is information? Because I think that light exists, and light has like a
Let's
wavelength. So, like, is the
yeah, let's
wavelength of
use there's something you might like this example better. Let's talk music. So the 12, the forgive me if I'm off on this, but I believe there's 12 notes,
in the
correct?
diatonic system, which is a very Eurocentric way of thinking? Yes.
Okay. So like E, the note E, where you're gonna say, nominally we just call this thing E, this note,
Correct.
but this frequency, whether it's like 157 hertz or whatever it is, I mean that's an actual thing. And then there's actually a point where an E turns into an F, and there's an actual difference. And then there's this fundamental um, structure to music that follows outside of our calling it E or calling it F. We can call it whatever we want, but there's 12 numbers,
I love
and then
this.
there's
I
well,
love this. This
well,
is
yeah. This
this
is
is
this is what I think about.
fantastic. No, yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, so we can switch the numbers, we can switch the names of the numbers. We can say two is one and one is two, and we can call it whatever we want. But
Give me 1 second.
yep, yeah. Let's break it out. I'll get mine too. I'll get mine too.
Keep going because I will demonstrate something.
Hold on. All right.
Oh, we're gonna have a jam session.
All right. So I got my Schecter here.
Nice. I only grabbed
um,
my acoustic so that I can demonstrate something, but um, so
and
for
I'm
my
tuned down half a step, so we're gonna be
I'm
off.
tuned down a whole step. So look at
Oh,
that.
okay. Right on.
Um, so this would be an E, but it's actually a D because I'm tuned down a whole step. But if I just play the open string, that's a D. And if I play this, the first fret right here, that's an E flat and then an E. What I
Okay.
just said right there is only true if you have this very medieval Eurocentric view of music. There are ethnicities and cultures that use non-diatonic uh, uh, forms of music. For instance, what is this note?
Well, yeah. Well, let's say
It's
let's say I yeah. All right, keep going with your
it's a half of a degree higher than D, but it's also half of a degree lower than D sharp. So it's D
right.
half sharp. D half sharp doesn't exist in this very like Baroque, 17th, 18th century Eurocentric vision of what music is. But it does exist in a lot of cultures. If you look, for instance, at like Asian music, a
Mhm.
lot of Asian music will use non diatonic notes. There's a band currently out there today called King Gizzard and the Slizzard Lizard, or something like that. They have the weirdest name, but they make music non diatonically, which is to say that they are playing half sharps and half flats. What the heck does any of that mean? Doesn't really matter. My point is that music is not as simple as the as some Catholic realists would. I don't know if this is exactly where you were going, but
Probably
music
not.
isn't as real as people think it is.
Okay. So I don't know if by real we're getting the same idea, but so like you just played your notes. Now, what would you say if I were to say, no, this is D and this is D sharp? I'm a half step off from you, right?
Yeah,
So which of us is right?
I mean, more
You're
people would
right,
agree with
right?
me, but those are just labels that we use.
So what are we actually talking about though? When we use those labels, what we're
Frequencies.
actually talking, what's that?
Frequencies. What we're actually talking about is
Frequencies
frequencies. Yep.
and hertz in the
Yeah.
form of hertz.
Hertz is you measure a frequency in hertz.
Right. So there is if you talk about like circle of fifths, um, there's a certain structure to music that it seems like artists like Beethoven or Mozart, they're almost like I said with that door again, and this is why music is another gateway. They're
Music and quantum
opening that
physics, man. Gateways to
what
aliens. Music and quantum physics. The two gateways to aliens.
or spirits.
Or spirits.
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, so there's a certain structure to it. You can agree it works. You know, chords work. You know, like there's certain structures that can be I don't know what the word would be, not applicable, but interchangeable across the fretboard. And what I mean is, it seems as if it was designed.
Yeah. So why does a first, a major third, and a fifth sound happy, and a first, a minor third, and a fifth sound sad? Why?
Okay, well, we first have to define what sad and happy means. Maybe for me, I might be, autistic, and I might think, this death metal sounds happy, um, but like what you're getting at is like emotion being tied to sound, and it's the way it makes you feel,
Right.
right? So if I said it made me feel terrible, or if I said it made me feel sad and it makes you feel happy, which of us is right?
Well, that's kind of exactly my point. The reason
Right.
so and there are actually some there was a really interesting study done on a like on an uncontacted tribe somewhere in like the Amazon or something. They didn't really have music, like just music wasn't part of their culture, and a whole bunch
Mhm.
of researchers played various scales for them, and they couldn't tell a happiness difference between do re mi versus do re may, they couldn't tell the difference between the major and the minor third being like they could hear the difference, but they didn't think that one was happy and one was sad. Like they were just like, okay,
Have
this
you
just sound different. So my point is that music doesn't actually, like, things that sound good to us, it is really just subjective.
I would argue, and here's my argument. Have you ever taken a music IQ test?
No, but I did take AP music theory in high school.
So if you take like a music IQ test, obviously this is subjective, but what they're getting at is good musicians have a certain musical intellect. They have the ability to discern things like happy notes from sad notes. And to a lot of normal people, they wouldn't be able to do that because they're not able to grasp that concept or go into that place. But what they're really appealing to is that there is a knowledge to get and to understand.
There's a cultural knowledge where we've learned to associate major thirds with a happy sound and minor thirds with a sad sound.
But what I mean by the music IQ, if someone were very talented in having a lot of these skills, they'd be apt towards, being good at music, being, proficient at progressing in music. If someone didn't have any of these, if someone couldn't tell you the difference, if someone thought, that is the same as that, and they can't tell the difference, and they're, what do they call it, tone deaf or
Yeah.
something, they're not going to be very musically inclined. And the ability to tell the difference between these sounds, although they are partially our senses, I think it's to something deeper, but it's getting at a deeper truth to our reality, and our reality then just subjective. Because if I just played a bunch of crap and I said this is great music, no one's going to agree to that. But there's something about Beethoven that he possesses all these attributes. He possesses this knowledge, this yeah.
But there is music that you think sounds like crap that somebody else
Mm-hmm.
loves. There absolutely
Right,
is. Let's say that you
right.
hate country and let's say that I love country, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
so I think that challenges the notion of music being objective.
I think music in the form of taste is subjective 100%. But if you get me, a bunch of death metal artists together and someone plays some off chords, we're going to say that's off. What I'm arguing is that there is a structure to music that seems to be designed, and it seems to be um, from a higher. I don't want to say the word dimension again because I don't know if that's the correct
I
word,
mean, it
but
was designed by a whole bunch of Europeans in,
is it?
well, I guess the base of our music really started in, like, ancient Greece and stuff like that. But my
Yeah.
point is that if you look at the music that wasn't designed by Europeans in Greece 2,000 years ago, right? That's, the Ionian mode, the Aeolian mode, the Mixolydian mode. Those are all different tribes within Greece, if I recall correctly. Um,
Okay.
but if you look, for instance, at non-European music, it's all very different. It's non-diatonic, right? The majors and minor thirds don't evoke the same emotions that they do here, and what they think sounds good and what sounds bad is very different, very different. Like the minor second interval, it's the most dissonant interval in Western music, but the minor second interval is like a key part of, like, Middle Eastern music, for instance.
Right. That's actually my people.
There you
I'm
go.
Armenian. Yeah.
There's
Um.
the right the
Yeah. The high ones sound. The high ones are where you get the. Yeah. They. Yeah.
but that's the minor second interval, and
Yep.
it's like, it's weird. It sounds awful
Yeah.
to us, especially if we play it
Yeah.
like that sounds awful to us.
System of a Down.
Yeah. They do a lot of that stuff too, and a lot of people think that System of a Down sounds awful.
They're
I happen to like
Armenian.
System of a Down.
Yeah, they're Armenian, and actually, if you
Really?
yeah,
I did not know
if
that.
you actually listen to their music, the main guy Serge, I think he actually sounds a lot like Orthodox Armenian chanting, and you can
Really?
see where they got their sound from. It's actually really like deep.
That's super cool. I actually did not know that. It's like a whole new layer
Yeah,
to System of a
yeah.
Down.
My Armenian brothers. Yeah, those they were Satanists though. They're
Oh,
Satanists.
okay, okay. I like him even more now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just. That's cool though. It's
um,
like a new appreciation for my favorite band from 20 years ago. That's that's pretty cool.
there we go. Um, well, I would say that we discovered music, and you would say we created it, right?
Uh, yeah, we created the diatonic scale, right? And then
I
we
think we
like
discovered that
um, but like we. So you think that we discovered the diatonic scale?
just in the same way that we discovered math.
Well, so what do you think about the cultures that don't use diatonic scales?
They, well, I mean, like you said, like it's not a perfect form of the music, but I think they're discovering a way to basically put together these sounds. And I don't think they put like they didn't they discovered it in the sense that they couldn't make it 13 if they wanted.
Why
They
not?
made it 12 because it worked. You know what I mean? There's a part of our reality that just works. They didn't, and that's what the part that I mean they discovered. They might be discovering another aspect of it. You could make it 24, I suppose, if you just chop their fretboard up.
You could cut it into 13 if you wanted to.
Yeah,
You could. You absolutely could. It would be very easy today. There are actually softwares where you can actually set the individual cutoff for like each note. And so if you just
yeah.
divide the total frequency of an octave, and I don't remember what like the total frequency is, but instead of dividing it by 12, you can just divide it by 13, and then you could have 13 tones between in an octave. Um and nobody uses it that way, and they don't use it
Why
that
not?
because we're not used to it.
Does it sound like crap to us?
To us, yes, absolutely.
I would argue that our bodies were engineered for the 12 point system, and that's why it works. As far as
So do you
our
think that like
neurotransmitters,
non-diatonic music just doesn't work then?
I don't know what you're talking about when you mean that, but I can imagine some sort of foreign, um, what, yeah, some sort of foreign explanation or exploration of chords.
So I'm putting a so they're called King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard. And the Lizard Wizard.
Okay,
That's the band
okay,
name. I'm just putting in the chat right now. They make non-diatonic music, but they're Americans. I'm pretty sure they're Americans. Um, and they do like their music is strange. It'll when you listen to it, you're gonna be like, what?
hmm,
And if you look at their guitars, just Google sometime like King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard guitar, um,
yeah,
and it has it's not like this where it's just even frets all over the place. It has
hmm.
like frets in weird spots because it was a specially made guitar for their non-diatonic music. Um, Let me see if I can. There's one like main song that they have. Um, Let me see if I can find the name of it. Let's see. I'm probably not going to find it right now. I'm not like super into them, um, but I had a friend in college who was really into King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Um, yeah, their music is super psychedelic and weird and out there, but
Yeah,
and so you might not like it.
yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, plenty of cultures like it's a very Eurocentric way to think about music. If you're like, oh, only diatonic music is correct. It's like, well, no,
Yeah,
that's
no,
what
I
we're
wouldn't
used
I
to.
wouldn't say correct. I just, so what I mean is like you see that that 12-point system works, right, in a certain way. Like there's
Yeah.
a it's the same as math. So I use music because it's something we both have in common, but like math is the same way. Do you think that we discovered, like we created math, or are we discovering this stuff, these formulas work and they're actually representative of our real reality?
Yeah, so a little bit of both, right? So I'm a nominalist even about math, but I do think that like, if you have, you know, one thing and another thing, that is two things. So like
Right.
that was discovered, but then the way
Uh-huh.
that we go about like the Arabic numerals that our Arabic friends came up with however many thousand years ago or whatever, those were invented. So both. I know that's not a
Sure.
satisfying answer, but
Well, I'm trying to go deeper than that because we both know that. We know that the numerical 2
sorry, Daniel nailing it. The blue notes
blues.
in and the blue notes are so like in some people are tempted to call a blue note a it's what is this note? In like the if you're playing like a minor pentatonic and you're going like that note, the
Yep.
it's a tritone above the root, so it's like a flat fifth.
Yeah,
Um,
like those bending like
People call that the blue note. But like the real blue note is like a bend. Like you're kind of like you're taking the fourth of the scale and you're bending up not even a half step.
right, right.
And that's non-diatonic. The
It's like that.
blues is non-diatonic. And where did the blues come from? Right? The blues is like perhaps um the most popular non-Eurocentric music, right? Because the blues is largely like a Black American, uh, I don't want to use the word invention, but like that's kind of where the blues came from. A non-European, like a non-white European culture. So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the way I'm imagining it is so they just had a guitar, right? So they have the guitar and then they basically make the music from there.
and they ignore the 12
And
notes that you
they
can play on a piano because you can't play it like a blue note on a piano to Daniel's point.
Yeah, but it's still they still invented it from the 12-note guitar. You know what I mean? They may be changing it, and it may they might find things work because they're discovering, like I'm saying, exploring. They're exploring music and finding new limits to what these things sound, feel, make us feel like. But I'm not making it. This isn't like a gotcha, but it is still on that 12-point guitar, whereas it's not like they just got a string, which there's definitely an argument. There's probably some, Maasai or tribal groups that probably just literally did get a string and like just put different, you know, notes in there, and they have their way of music. But uh, it's pretty deep into music theory. I mean, I've never taken a music theory class, but
I'm pretty into music theory. Like
yeah,
so I took AP music theory, whatever that means. Don't worry about that. But like I'm really into like prog metal and stuff like that. Like I'm really into like Dream Theater and Steve Vai and stuff like that. So I like that
you
stuff.
said prog metal. What is it? Just
Progressive
like
metal.
t- oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like metal. I honestly just like kind of liked metal on my own. I kind of just came upon it. I was never like into that scene. I was more of like punk rock. When I grew up, it was Blink 182, Sum 41, and I just had a guitar. And then I remember learning one song. The first song I learned was Six, All That Remains, a metal song, the first metal song that I learned. And from there, I just was like, this stuff is awesome. And then I just kept like discovering new stuff, and like I really liked it. And then I would just make my own music, and it would actually, usually when I made my own songs, they were usually more like hard metal than like softer stuff. So I don't know if that's just like my expression, whatever's inside of me, that's just what I feel. But yeah, kind of is the way it is.
And sorry, I totally interrupted you because Daniel had the comment about the blue note, and then we were getting off of music and onto math, and we were talking about whether math is created
Right.
or discovered, and then I interrupted you.
I think it's the same thing, but math is easier because it's, I don't know what the word would be. It's a lot more structured,
As
and
somebody
there's a lot.
who got a C in Calc 2, I'm deeply offended at the notion that math is easy.
Well, maybe
I'm just
that's
kidding.
why, because
I'm
you're a
just kidding.
musician. Maybe that's why. Yeah, I think it's a different intellect, but it's a lot more structured, and there's probably a lot less debate, even though there is debate in mathematicians. So, um, the Christian arguments. I don't even. I'm not even going to go through this stuff because now, like, hearing your testimonies, like, I know that you've heard this stuff. You're just not convinced of it. You've heard teleological argument for intelligent design. It's not enough. You're not convinced. Do you believe? I think I asked you this already, but do you believe in intelligent design, or do you believe in chaotic randomness? And I know I pigeonholed you there, but how would you answer that question?
Yeah, like if I could be cheeky, I would say kind of both or neither. Um, and the reason I would
Neither.
say that is because evolution by natural selection is a deterministic process, so it's certainly not random. Um, so
Okay.
I definitely don't like if I had to pick one or the other, I would say intelligent design, and then I would be like, well, that's
Okay.
just a really weird
And
label for evolution by means of natural selection. Um,
so the intelligence that created, that is the catalyst for creation, you believe that's impersonal. You believe that's an impersonal force. So let me repeat that again.
yeah,
Something created us. Let's just start from the basic. Something created this, our reality. We can talk about humans, talk about plants, animals, something or someone. Let's just label it down to something, some essence, ontology, strictly ontological. Something created something. You don't believe that nothing created something, right?
so really, I have no idea.
Okay, but do you believe that something created something? Do you think that's more plausible to
No.
believe?
So, well, the first law of thermo is that things are neither created
Created nor
nor
destroyed.
destroyed. So
So
I don't think
all
that
is matter and energy.
right. So I don't think that anything has been created like since
It just
time started.
exists.
Since time started, I don't think anything has been created or destroyed.
Okay.
Things
Okay.
have changed, but there's been this balance of matter energy that has existed since time started. Asking me what happened
Well,
before time started, all I can be is like, I don't even know if that question makes sense. Like, what happened before time
let's not
started?
even do that.
I don't know, man.
We're not getting into time. It's like me, like the human being. Um, Something created me.
So I actually disagree. I don't think that you per se exist. What do I mean by
My
that? This is weird.
Yeah.
So this is mereological nihilism. So
Oh
what?
boy.
Yeah,
That's where I was trying to take you. As long as you're being honest. All
yeah.
right.
So
So you okay? Go on. Explain it.
mereological nihilism is the idea that like most of the things that we label don't exist per se, but we speak as if they do because it's convenient to do so. But
Because we're
what
pretending.
really does exist are the simples that make those things up. So that's non-controversial when we talk about a cell phone, right? So cell phones per se don't have like their own ontological existence. They are composed of computer processors and memory and storage and circuits and whatever. That's not controversial to say. However, it starts to get controversial when you start talking about organic things, and a lot of
Like
philosophers.
electricity, like the electricity that's transmitted through the cell phone. Like those things have ontology.
Yeah, so like the atoms exist, right? So,
Yeah.
like, yeah. Um, but I think that even me and you are comprised of smaller pieces. Now, that sounds non-controversial the way that I said it, but I loaded the deck in my favor. Um,
Say it again. Smaller pieces. What do you mean by
I
smaller
think that you
pieces?
and I are made up of smaller
Atoms,
pieces. Yeah. And then things smaller
and
than
then
atoms too,
quanta,
protons and neutrons and
quanta,
quark. Yeah.
quanta. Yeah.
All the way down. Who knows how far it goes down? I don't know. But we call whatever is at the base of it simples. Maybe those simples are quarks. Maybe those simples are actually fields. Who knows? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Whatever's at the base of it, I'm going to call simples. And I think that the only things that actually exist are those simples. And then those simples are arranged cell phone wise. So this is not actually a smartphone. This is a collection of mereological simples arranged smartphone wise. This is not actually a cup. This is a collection of mereological simples arranged cup wise. This is not a guitar pick. This is a collection of mereological simples arranged pick-wise. That's such a mouthful to say, though, so nobody talks like that. So instead, I'm just going to say pick, and you're going to know that I mean a collection of mereological simples arranged pick-wise, and we're not going to use that really long phrase ever again. Except for when we start talking about me and you. I think that you, per se, don't exist. I think that what exists is a collection of mereological simples arranged mark-wise, and I don't think that I exist. I think that a collection of mereological simples arranged Kevin-wise exists. So if that is the case, then you and I never really started existing because we kind of don't exist, but the mereological simples do exist, and they did become arranged like us at some point.
Kevin, how many people believe like you?
I don't know. Mereological nihilism is actually a popular view among PhD philosophers, though.
I didn't mean that as an insult, but it is a lot to it's a lot to digest.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And for people that aren't understanding the implications that the burden that puts on you, are you willing to live your life as if that is the case? As if this is
100%.
all just a fantasy and we're making things up
I don't
and
think that
there's
this is
no
all a fantasy. I think that this is all a
value?
collection of mereological simples.
Right. I'm using another word that you're not going to agree with, but the way I think what I mean is what you mean.
So I actually
In
don't
this,
think that that's the case. And the reason why I say that is because what are the implications of mereological nihilism? Like nothing. There's like no implications of mereological nihilism. Like our understandings of the world
well,
do
that's just
not
it.
change.
Yeah, but like when you say you love your wife, you're just saying that because the neurotransmitters and hormones in your brain produce this feeling that you say is love, but that doesn't really exist, and it's not really big T true. It's just your subjective
I mean,
opinion,
it's big T true that
experience.
those chemicals really are
Yeah,
in my brain, and I really
yeah.
do act a certain way towards my wife. Like I do whatever is entailed by loving somebody, right? So all that stuff
Okay,
is the same. Like what is different between these two views? The difference is that one of us thinks that love exists in the platonic realm and the other one doesn't. Really, that's it.
right.
But the platonic realm does not interact with our realm. Realists agree with that. So if these abstracta really
Causally
are
inert.
causally inert, very good, then there's kind of no difference between the two except for positing an additional thing into our ontology. So I just choose not to posit that additional thing into our ontology, and realists do posit that additional thing into our ontology. But after we're done positing that thing that does not interact with the causal chain at all, everything else is the same. So I really don't think that mereological nihilism is this world altering thing like a lot of people seem to think it is. I really think it's like less important. You know what I mean?
Well, if you can distance it from your experience, because I think as most people experience life, they act as if these things are real. I think you must even have to do that in the sense by real, I mean, like we defined earlier. And that love that you may feel although you may not be able to locate it in time and space, you know that when you're around your wife, it is distinctly different than the feeling that you get when you're around, say, your friend or your doctor. Um, I think we're never going to have an explanation that can encapsulate truth in a science. But the difference that it seems that we have in our belief, and it's actually a lot less than I thought after, the couple conversations that we've had. Because I thought when you first said anti-realism, you're talking about some other form of wackiness of like only our basically like when you said I don't exist, it's like I only exist because you're looking at me and there's you to observe me.
Yeah,
That's
no.
what I see as anti-realism, and maybe that's just a fault of my understanding of the definition. Um, but yeah, you're right on with the nihilism. You're right on with the Platonic realms, and I think Plato would have been a Christian. What do you think?
I have no idea.
I think he would have
Sometimes
been a
sometimes I think to myself like, man, if those guys were around today, they'd all be like atheists or something. And then I think to myself like, I I have no way of knowing. I have no idea.
yeah. Well, I think the way he speaks, and then the Thomas Aquinas kind of reiterating his arguments, and I know we've been talking for a while. I guess we'll sum it up. I'll say I'm not a fan of Occam. Okay, I
I'm
don't like
shocked.
Occam's razor.
I'm not
Yeah, why
shocked.
is that though? Why is it that there's this certain inclination of people that think like me to be like Thomas Aquinas and you know Tradcath and like because I didn't even know this was a thing. I thought I was unique. Now you're telling me there's a bunch of other people like
Oh, dude,
kind of burst in my bubble.
I was studying Aquinas's five ways, studying, but like in eighth grade, the priest at my little trad school handed us like he made his own apologetics curriculum, and we studied
Yeah,
Aquinas's five ways. And of course, Aquinas is a saint in Catholic culture, so like we prayed to
right.
Saint Thomas Aquinas, like we were all about Aquinas,
Yeah,
right?
I don't
Like
like that.
so, um, yeah. You're not the only
But
Aquinas fan, There's
no, I'm not really a huge Aquinas fan. I kind of think Aquinas was kind of a nerd and like in like the sense of like he's over focusing on um this stuff about theology where he's overcomplicating it and turning it into science where it doesn't have to be taken that seriously. But there's a lot of people that love him. I'm not a huge fan of Aquinas, and I think um, Augustine. I I like the way Augustine speaks better. Aquinas kind of seems like a elitist, at least. but but the weird thing is like there's that it's going to be backwards. Occam over here on the no, sorry, Aquinas on the right. Have to
I know it's backwards. I know.
yeah, my
You're good. Don't worry about it.
dyslexia, and Occam on the left. And like it's pretty accurate even in politics, and like the way you see politics go. Trad is right, Aquinas right, Plato, so, Aristotle, and then you have like science and Occam's razor, which I absolutely hate because it destroyed my life. Um, and what I mean by that is doctors. When I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, a lot of doctors, were using Occam's razor to say, well, this isn't possible and this isn't plausible. And the the evidence is that this disease is not chronic and that it's cured in 2 weeks. And my experience was violently different than that in ways that I can't even express into words on how much that is not true. But that's why I just want to harp on the fact that just because something is more plausible does not mean it's true. Look at sports. How many times have you seen a tennis player down 2-0 and come and win 3 sets? Um, if you were to make a bet, I have a friend that's lost a lot of money on Occam's razor in the gambling world. It's not a science, and it's not even close to telling us about truth. It's about probability, and probability. If you're going to take your stance, which I actually agree in a deterministic sense about probability, I don't think probability exists. I think it's probability is our version of um, basically making a guess on a realm that we can't see, but it was always going to happen that way in the realm that we couldn't observe it in. We just weren't aware of it.
Yeah, no, that's like exactly right. If you look at any one individual thing, it'll be determined one way or the other. And then probabilities are just people saying, hey, X% of these events are going to be determined this way and X% are going to be determined the other way. That's what probabilities are. So,
Yeah.
but
All
they're
right.
not
Good
saying that
stuff.
any one of them is actually, it has an equal shot of, 50-50 doesn't mean that any single one of them really could go one way or the other. It just means that if we did them 100 times, around 50 of them would go one way, 50 of them would be determined to go one way, and 50 of them would be determined to go the other way. So that's all that means.
Yeah. Well, man, um, I might have to put down my sword.
Hey, I agree. We've been at this for, wow, 2 hours now. All I want to add though is that you have a bunch of fans in the live chat. I've been meaning to pull up more of it, but I also didn't want to cut you off and stuff like that. But I'll leave
Yeah.
us on this one. Daniel says we need an episode 3 for Mark. So everybody had different favorites too. Some people were saying that the quantum alien stuff was their favorite. Some people are saying that the philosophy stuff was their favorite. But we touched on a lot of topics today. We did good. I'm proud
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good stuff, and we kept it moving. We didn't get hung up on stuff, but
It was good.
yeah. I mean, I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm really interested in how you think, because I think we have fundamentally different
Yes.
minds.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. And I think
I think we
that
can each learn something from each other.
yeah, yeah. And I think that so many conversations um don't do what you and I are kind of doing right now, where we're like really
Yeah.
trying to get, and instead they argue about like the existence of God and stuff like that. Meanwhile, they don't even
Yeah.
agree on things like nominalism or realism and
Right.
meteorological nihilism versus some kind of non-nihilistic view on meteorology. And like if you don't agree with any of that stuff, it's kind of hard to have a conversation about
Yeah.
this stuff that kind of builds on top of that. So,
Yeah, it's basically I'm kind of appalled with a lot of like debates in the debate world, in the debate scene, because a lot of it is like based on gotchas and making the other person look foolish, which doesn't even mean that they're actually wrong. It just means they look bad,
exactly. Debates
you know?
aren't actually about like getting to the truth. Debates are
Right.
about like rhetoric and tribalism and
Rhetoric.
like
Yeah.
yeah, and like scoring points and stuff like that, which is why I much prefer, so I've done a couple like debates and
Yeah.
I enjoy them, right? But I think the conversations like the one that you and I just had are
Yeah.
much more productive than a debate where we're not interested in actually being like get it working together to get to the truth. Instead, we're just trying to like
Yeah.
score points and stuff. So
Yeah, I want to say intellectually honest, but it's almost more like prideful. It's like
yeah,
thinking about your ego and how you look and how smart you said. Like I probably wouldn't have said any of that crazy stuff if I was, trying to sound perfect. But it is what I think.
yeah.
It's how I think.
An informal conversation like the one that we just had allows us to be more honest about what we know and what we don't know, and what
Right.
we don't know but we think. And like in a debate
Yeah.
structure, you kind of don't have that same freedom that we
Yeah.
have in
That
a conversation like
humility.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, right on. Right on, Kev. It's
Um,
good stuff.
Rosemary says it's been super fun, and CJ says that we are both learners and open-minded. So just lots of compliments from the audience. So you've got fans. Um, and did you want to close on any specific statement, or do you think we're all set?
Yeah, I think we're pretty good. Yeah. probably have thoughts after, but we'll see.
As always, as always. Well, hey, I'm not
Yeah.
going anywhere. So, uh, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I've been Kevin. Mark has been Mark. This has been Conversations with Catholics. And until next time.